First of all, welcome and thank you so much, everybody, for being here today to talk about the next 5 or 6 years of transportation challenges here on the east side and in King County. My name's Claudia Balducci. I think I know everybody. I'm a King County Councilmember for District 6, which represents most of the inner part of the east side of Lake Washington. And I would recognize all of the elected officials and dignitaries, but that would be all of you, and it would take a while. I do want to call out a few folks. I will say we've got representation here today from Bellevue, Beaux-Arts, Bothell, Clyde Hill, Issaquah, Kenmore, Kirkland, Medina, Mercer Island, Newcastle, Redmond, Renton, Sammamish, and Woodinville. I want to thank WSDOT Secretary Roger Millar for being here today and presenting. Later, very soon, we'll see Sound Transit CEO Peter Rogoff will be here, but right now they're busy negotiating with Mercer Island, so everybody cross your fingers that that goes well, and we will see him. And also Metro Executive Director Rob Gannon, General Manager Rob Gannon is here. I know he's here somewhere. There he is, Rob. Thank you for being here. We expect some representation from Seattle. I don't see them yet, but they were going to come and participate with us today. Oh, hello, Genesee Atkins. I'm sorry. I see you. I don't think Seattle. I think Genesee. And also we have Ingrid Gaub from Auburn on behalf of the mayor of Auburn. Thank you so much, Ingrid, for being here today, because the issues that we have, they cross jurisdictional lines, and it's really nice to be able to have you to speak with us. We also have Josh Brown, Executive Director of PSRC, Representative Joan McBride, and Tana Sen was going to be here. I don't know if she arrived yet. And also we have representation from Senator Murray and Cantwell's office. So thank you all very much for being here today. So why do this? Some people have said, hey, this is like the forum that Mayor Butler held not too long ago, and it's true, we copied him. But the topic is going to be somewhat different. I think you all know, and I don't need to tell you, that growth and in jobs and housing and population is just really continuing to move very fast in our region. It is a problem that is a good problem to have. There are other regions of this country that would trade places with us in a heartbeat, but it does come with the challenges of traffic and all kinds of headaches for people trying to get around. So we all, I think every one of us in here has worked for a long, long time on making progress on transportation, providing more and better transportation options. And we have made a lot of progress. And I think it's important to always acknowledge that at the beginning. We collectively, in the time I've been in office, have seen the nickel package, the dime package, the Transportation Partnership Act, a lot of investment in our state roads. We've seen Sound Move projects start to come online with the new light rail opening in Seattle. And to the south, we have ST2 now currently under construction, and some of those stations have opened already. ST3 is going to be a tremendous addition to our regional transportation system. Metro has seen its ups and downs with its funding sources, but we have Rapid Ride innovations, and now we've got Metro Connects, which is a long-range plan to provide much more and much better bus service throughout our region. So we've been making steady progress trying to keep up with growth, but all of this comes with a lot of construction and a lot of getting from here to there. So one day, about 6, maybe 8 weeks ago, I was over in Bellevue City Hall having a standing meeting that we have, occasionally getting a briefing, and I started to hear about some of the work that was being done to prepare for this confluence of construction that was coming. And it just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks that this region is going to start to be under construction and continue to be under construction for about the next 5 or 6 years. There is a confluence of different things happening all at once. And the good news is there are efforts going on to try to get ahead of that. There's mitigation work that's been done by each of the agencies. There's cooperative work in the One Center City program, which we'll hear some about today. WSDOT has been pulling together groups of people to try to coordinate, but I don't think that those of us at the local level really understand the kind of constraint that our system is about to see, and we need to understand it. And I think we also need to work together to do everything we can to bring all our creativity, our resources, our partnership with our regional providers to make sure we're doing everything we can to help our residents through this period of time. Because it's going to be 5 or 6 years of pain. And we're not going to see a lot of gain until after that time is over. So that's the challenge in front of us. And I just really appreciate everybody being here to work together. I encourage us all to have good conversations today. I know people want to get out, but I hope we can just sort of take our time this afternoon and really think about creative ways we might be able to help the traveling public working together, because I think we can do kind of amazing things when we really put our minds to it. And I know I've got a lot of great minds in here today. So with that, just a couple of things. First of all, the gentlemen at the back with the cameras are from King County TV. So feel free to say or do whatever you like at the meeting today, but know that it will be broadcast at some future date. We wanted to make sure that these presentations and the report outs could be seen by the public later on, because this is about what we're doing on behalf of them. And I guess, is that it? Yes, that's it. Enjoy, do good work. And now I'm going to introduce John Howell, who has thoughtfully agreed to be our moderator, facilitator today, and he's going to run the show. So thanks again. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Councilmember. My name's John Howell with a small consulting firm called Cedar River Group. I won't bore you with the details, but I've done a lot of work over the last decade plus on various transportation issues on the east side and on the west side of the lake. So delighted to be here today. If you all have an agenda, and you can tell that it's divided into two parts. The first part is we want to have a set of presentations to give everybody a common grounding and understanding about those projects and potential impacts and the work that's underway to mitigate those impacts that Councilmember Balducci just mentioned. And we'll do that in the next hour or so. So, with no further ado, the place that we wanted to start, Ariel Taylor from Councilmember Balducci's office has been working with many of you and your staffs to pull together some information about local projects that may well have regional impact and significance. And so you have material in your packet, but we were going to ask Ariel to walk through for you what it is she has learned, and we'll share that with you first. Ariel?
Hello, everybody. Looks like my computer went to sleep, so just bear with me here for a second. Hopefully it just pulls right back up. Excellent. So first of all, thank you for being here on a Friday afternoon. I know that the weather has been really nice lately, maybe not so much right now, but still it's a Friday afternoon nonetheless, so thank you. I'm really happy that everybody is here and received Councilmember Balducci's sort of call to come together and sort of talk about what's sort of happening here on the east side and sort of around the region. So I'm here to sort of go over what I've sort of found over the east side after like going and speaking with a lot of the people in your cities, especially staff, about what is happening right there in their jurisdictions. Basically between right now, 2017, and when Eastlink opens in 2023 and the extension in 2024. But many of you might know me already, many of you probably don't, but my name is Ariel Taylor, and I do transportation and communications for Councilmember Balducci. And so I was sort of tasked with going out and finding all of these projects that you will find on the maps in your packet, starting on page 6. Basically, I wanted to try to find out what the cities were feeling, sort of like how they were feeling about transportation in general, how they were feeling about the long-term impacts of build-outs of like Eastlink and bus networks. And I also wanted to know if there were any projects happening in their own jurisdictions that might have some sort of like street closure or regional sort of effect on the transportation network. So you will see those maps starting on page 6. There are 4 different maps. They sort of go through a series of timelines that you can see here pretty soon. So I wanted to start with this presentation by showing you the immediate impacts. So this is 2017, so this is like right now. Each of you will sort of see that there's a lot of red on this map. There's actually one project on here that started this week. The closure of the Overlake Park and Ride facility happened on Monday. And I know that there was a huge outreach effort that was sort of focused around that, and I know that there is another one going on for the South Bellevue Park and Ride closure, which happens later this month too. So I sort of wanted to go over some of the more detailed portions of this map. So Kirkland, for instance, is seeing major growth, like a lot of the cities, in fact, all of the cities, I'm sure, around the region. And they have two major construction zones that are sort of in the pipeline. So right now they have the Kirkland Urban Development, which is in downtown Kirkland, or close to downtown Kirkland. It's downtown Kirkland. And there's also the Totem Lake Urban Center, which is going to be this big revitalization of a shopping center in the Totem Lake neighborhood. There's also changes to Interstate 90 with the closure of the center roadway for I-90 for Mercer Island residents. I'm sure you've all heard a lot about that. For Eastlink construction, excuse me. And there's also another street improvement going on in Bothell, which is the Main Street improvement projects, which are happening adjacent to State Route 520, or 522, excuse me. They're trying to revamp their downtown to have better access to State Route 522, especially as we get some more build out going on with capital investments up in that area. So this slide is going on to next year, so 2018. We see major transportation projects and transit restructures come online. Namely, I think the biggest one for a lot of the people in this room is going to be the State Route 520 bus restructures, which is sort of being triggered by a couple of different factors. One, Eastlink construction with the closure of the D2 roadway in the downtown Seattle Transit Tunnel, and also due to the sale of the Convention Place station to the Washington State Convention Center. So there's some sort of outreach going on right now about what to best do with some of the bus routes that come from the east side to downtown Seattle, and how to best get people to move throughout the city. There's also sort of some other various projects going on. There's the Bellevue to Renton I-405 expansion project to put in new roadways, put in the express toll lanes on the southbound area. There's also some other projects starting, like we're trying to sort of kick off the Eastlink extension to downtown Redmond. So that's sort of in the works, trying to get the planning right for that. There's also the rest of the West on 520. So WSDOT has big plans to finish the west side of this new beautiful bridge that I'm sure all of us have driven over. And there's just a lot of other downtown Seattle projects happening. So there's the demolition of the Alaskan Way Viaduct. It's the opening of the State Route 99 tunnel. There's also just like waterfront projects happening. So downtown Seattle is going to be a little bit of a cloud of I don't know yet, but it'll be a very interesting way to get people to and out of downtown. So this is a little bit more detailed version of the map that I just showed you. It has a lot of the projects in downtown Seattle, construction of the Eastlink extension. Yeah. So this is sort of like going a little bit farther out. So in 2020, we see major 405 improvements with the addition of bus rapid transit from Linwood to Renton and beyond, including significant capital improvements as specified within Sound Transit 3. We also see that the northbound only lanes on I-405 will be open to help clear some of the congestions on the north end of 405. And while many of these projects indicated on the previous slides continue, we do see two King County Department of Natural Resources and Parks projects that are included with the construction of the Northeast 8th overcrossing for the Eastside Rail Corridor, which sort of ties up a lot of major arterial in Bellevue right as it sort of connects to I-405, which is a major clogging point for Bellevue. And there's also the Enitai sewer upgrade, which is happening both in South Bellevue and on Mercer Island. So there could be some street closures and sort of impacts to how residents sort of move around the north end of the island and possibly also in South Bellevue. So what's not on this map, which I'm a little disappointed about, is that there is not the the showing of State Route 522 bus rapid transit. So that is also a major capital improvement project that will be happening on the north end of the lake. And then I wanted to quickly show you sort of the timeline when all of these things are happening. So all of these projects should be on the maps that you should have just seen. I will make a note that the Northeast 8th improvements are actually in Medina. The city of Medina is working with other points communities to help with Northeast 84th and sort of get more mobility and sort of better flow in that corridor. But I will say that many of these projects are actually overlapping in the 2020 to 2021 timeframe. And so while a lot of the 2020 to 2021 map doesn't really show a whole bunch of stuff happening, these are all start dates. So the 2020 to 2021 actually has the most projects continuing through it. So that's sort of like the crunch period that we're looking through. And then I wanted to sort of show you the master list. So this is all of the stuff that's happening between now, well, not all. There's probably things that we have missed, and we should talk about that in our small groups this afternoon. But these are the major projects that are happening around the region in the next 6 years. So there's a lot going on. And with that, I will hand it back over to John, and he can introduce our next set of speakers.
Thank you, Ariel. So one of the things that we had talked about in advance of today is that you all may have some other projects that you will believe have a significant regional impact, and Ariel's contact information is listed in your materials, and I'm looking at page 11. Hopefully it's the same page for all of you. But if you have additional information that you'd like to have included in this overview, please provide that to Ariel. And the only other thing I wanted to mention that Ariel touched on, but again, Councilmember Balducci and a little planning group talked about this in advance. We talked about whether or not we wanted to highlight for you today a number of projects happening in Seattle. And we decided that we absolutely wanted to do that for those that we believe will have significant implications and potential impacts for Eastside communities, residents, and businesses. So if you're sitting here wondering why are there so many projects on the west side of the lake, that was our thinking about including those projects. So next, we are delighted that Secretary of Transportation Roger Millar is here with us today, and welcome Roger to the stage, and we'll hear about WSDOT's projects first.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Roger. It's great to be here. Looking at the guest list, over my 40-year career, I have been a city public works director. I've been a city planning director. I've been a county planning director. I've been a transportation and land use consultant. So I know, I guess, where you're coming from, and I know how I felt when I was in those positions about me. And I won't hold it against any of you. The last 5 years, but prior to joining WSDOT in October of 2015, I was a vice president for an organization called Smart Growth America, doing technical assistance with DOTs and communities around the country. And you know, one of the things that we're talking about, and I think Claudia mentioned it, it's a problem a lot of people would love to have. I meet with my peers from around the country. They don't have resources, or they are dependent on federal resources. And here in Washington State, about a quarter of our state DOT budget is federal. Most of it is actually state funding. And it's because our leaders and the citizens we serve have made the conscious decision to invest in these improvements. And that's a good thing, but it has some consequences. As somebody who's done planning, I know one community shows up when you're doing the policy work, and one community shows up when you're doing the regulatory work, and there's a completely different community that shows up when the bulldozers show up. they all live in the same town. They're different people. And what we're seeing around the region and around the state, regardless of what we do, is, nobody told me, nobody informed me. When was I asked my opinion? We know that happens, and what we do as an agency and what we do as your partner is everything we can to get good information out to minimize that. But it's still going to happen. It's the nature of what we do. So let's talk about WSDOT a little bit. Construction traffic coordination is something that we start on years before the project hits the ground. And I want to make sure that all of you know that the stuff that's getting ready to hit the ground in your communities has been discussed with your community, with your staff, with your citizens, with your elected officials for years. And we will continue that discussion. We didn't just decide to rebuild I-405 from Renton to Bellevue. There was a little bit of thought that went into that. That early coordination happens in the planning phase, it happens in the environmental phase, it happens as we develop the project, it happens as we deliver the project, it happens after we deliver the project. And we're always looking for ways to get better at this, realizing we'll never be perfect at it. And that's, just again, the nature of it. We have a construction traffic management team that analyzes future transportation projects, looks at the likely impacts on traffic, looks at other impacts, and we spend a large part of that team's effort working in the central Puget Sound area. I mean, we are a statewide agency. I could tell you all about the North Spokane Connector. You probably don't care that much about that and the impacts of that on your lives, but the people out there do, believe me. We're out 5 years ahead of construction, identifying where the hot spots are going to be and talking to communities about those hot spots where we have significant projects in close proximity or significant impacts because of conflicts between projects. And we try to work out and resolve those differences ahead of time and understand that there are still going to be impacts, and we do that work, and that coordination intensifies as projects get closer. Where we're having quarterly discussions or annual discussions, it begins to be weekly and sometimes hourly discussions with our partners about just what's going on. So our approach, we coordinate these projects regardless of who the lead agency is, and increasingly we partner with other agencies like Sound Transit, with local government. We do that coordination and management because it's an ongoing thing, because construction projects are fluid. You may see us spend a week advertising about a bridge closure, and then on Thursday night or Friday morning we say, no, never mind, it's going to rain. Well, it's just the nature of it. We can't do striping in the rain, but if we think we're going to be able to do it, we're going to let your citizens know about it. And it's always interesting to see that, in particular, the social media responses to this stuff. There'll be day after day after day of social media, and then the day it happens, there'll be a tweet. Well, nice move, WSDOT. Well, who thought of that? The approach that we take balances the need to move traffic with the need to get the job done, and with sensitivity to the concerns of the immediate neighbors of our projects. We have neighbors that would love to see WSDOT do all of its construction Monday through Thursday between 10 and 3. We have other neighbors that would love to see us do our work at night, and others who think the last time we should do it is at night, and others who think it should all be on the weekend, and then people that get mad because they're going to do something on the weekend, and there we are out on the street. We're balancing our need to get the work done with our collective need to get around, to move the people and goods and services that keep our economy going, and that concern of the neighbor who would like to sleep at night and is kind of upset about the beeping backup sounds and the deliveries of the big girders and stuff like that are happening seemingly in their bedroom because they live next to one of our facilities. So we also look at maintenance of mobility during construction. We try to limit lane and ramp closures. A lot of folks who do work for us are becoming vampire-like because They start at 9 and they come home at 5 in the morning. And we do an awful lot of our work at times with lower traffic volumes. You wouldn't want us delivering bridge girders to a construction site during the rush hour. You wouldn't want us putting a sewer under 520 during the middle of the week, that kind of thing. We spend a lot of time on public outreach to make sure that people know about it, and also get feedback from people on how we could do it better and when we could do it better and that kind of thing. And we coordinate that construction work with our neighboring projects, not just transportation projects, but the big sewer projects and the like. And something that wasn't mentioned before is one of the things that's happening with our robust economy. A lot of the work that's going on is actually private sector work that you guys are entitling and permitting that affects our transportation system as well. So let's talk about some of the stuff that's going on. We mentioned the Seattle vicinity. We've been thinking about this for, I've been around for a couple of years, been thinking about it since the day I got here. And last year we started coordinating more intensely with a working group. We reached out to the mayor's office in Seattle and started working with WSDOT. We created a maintenance of mobility working group because it's all about maintenance of mobility. When you look at downtown Seattle from the waterfront up to the top of the hill, we're replacing Coleman Dock. At the same time, we're rebuilding Alaska Way and the waterfront. At the same time, we're taking the Alaska Way Viaduct down and decommissioning the Battery Street Tunnel. We're opening the Alaska Way Viaduct replacement project, the tunnel that Bertha built for us, and boy, are we glad to see her finished on the drive. Metro and Sound Transit are taking buses out of the bus tunnel because of the volume of light rail trains that are there and because of things that are happening at the convention center. There's a big project there. There's big paving jobs being done on north-south streets in the downtown by the city. We have a huge maintenance job out on I-5, basically from Shoreline all the way down to Kent. We're replacing expansion joints, we're replacing pavement and the like, because that facility, which was designed and built to last 20 years, we've been able to stretch it out to last 50 or more, and it's just time. And we would rather make the investment and do the night and weekend closures because it's a lot less impactful on our economy if we replace an expansion joint at 2 in the morning on a Sunday versus 8 in the morning on a Monday, which is what happens if we don't make that investment. So that's going on. We're doing a big repaving of Aurora from South Lake Union up to the north to 145th. What else could we pave? All these things are happening. It's 99, I-5, and then you start working your way over into this neck of the woods with the work on 520, the rest of the west I'll be talking about a little bit, the work on I-90 that we're wrapping up our piece of it and Sound Transit's picking up. We've got the big project on 405. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And we've been thinking about how to do this and working with all of you individually, literally for years on this. And I applaud Councilmember Balducci's bringing everybody together so that we can all see the big picture, because I think all of us have been talking about our little pieces of it. So let's talk about the East Side. Back in 2002, we reached consensus. I wasn't here. It must have been nice to reach consensus on something. I gave up on consensus years ago. I look for consent. Can you live with it? It's not everybody thinks this is the best idea, but a master plan was adopted back in 2002 for I-405. And the communities and the agencies along the corridor have been working to implement it ever since. And it's really important when we talk about, or as we prepare to talk about, the impacts of these individual projects, to recognize that projects in this corridor, they didn't drop in out of space. They're in a context, and we need to constantly remind ourselves of that. And as city councils change and elected officials move and staff moves and people move into the community, they might not have been here in 2002. This wasn't their decision but the investments are being made based on that. It calls for significant investment in I-405, and we've been making that investment. I got here in October of 2015. We opened the I-405 Express Toll Lane project from Bellevue up to Linwood in September of 2015. I wish I had been here in September of 2015 when I-405 was perfect. Because you think about what we did, the terrible thing we did. It must have been great before, but the context of that. We talk a lot about congestion and the problem of congestion. Congestion is a symptom of a problem and of an opportunity. It's a symptom of our rapid economic growth and our rapid population growth. And it's also a symptom of the fact that we don't give our public the housing and transportation choices that they need. If you choose to live in Snohomish County and drive by yourself to a job in Redmond, and you have the wherewithal to do that, I think that's great. That's a choice. If you feel you have no choice but to live in Snohomish County because you can't afford to live in King County, and you have no choice but to drive because there isn't any option to driving, that's a problem. And a lot of the congestion we see is related to that. And the projects we're doing in the 405 corridor are not going to solve congestion in the 405 corridor. They're going to help us as communities manage congestion and give people choices to driving alone in congestion as we move forward. And it's really important to remember that. We opened just recently the shoulder from 527 up to Linwood. It added some capacity to that corridor. It's not going to solve the congestion problem because the traffic's going to grow and fill that capacity, but it gives us a means to manage that congestion, and the express toll lane that is there gives people some choices in the face of it. So the roadway investment is happening, and that's why it's happening, but the transit and transportation choices investments that are being made in the corridor are what's really exciting, because you're going to move over the life of this master plan from a auto-dependent corridor to a truly multimodal corridor. We have lots of choices about how you move north and south along the corridor and how you move east and west across the corridor. So there's bus rapid transit happening. There's new transit centers happening. We've got increases in transit service, the number of buses that are moving. We've got HOV direct access and transit direct access in the corridor. We've got the managed lane system working for us. We've got new park and ride spaces. And it's interesting, a lot of us get together quarterly as the I-405 Executive Advisory Group, and we went around the table at our last meeting. We're adding 5,000 new park and ride spaces, and everybody wanted more. But that's what we've got the funding for. And we've got a lot of new van pool service in the corridor. So there's a lot of stuff happening, and then environmental enhancements on top of it. That's what's in the master plan. In terms of what we funded, we just opened the PQ shoulder lane that I mentioned to you. It hasn't been open long enough to really be able to tell you statistically whether it's working or not, but the people that comment to us about it think it's great, except for the snarky ones that want to drive for free on the express toll lanes, and there's not a whole lot I can do about that. That was a policy decision that our legislature made, and we'll be revisiting that policy decision next year and going forward. We used toll revenue to fund that project, and when you look at the Connecting Washington package, when you look at all the money that's together that we're investing in 405, it's about $1.5 billion over the next several years that's funded. And that $1.5 billion, 200 million of it is toll revenue. So if the legislature decides that the pilot project is just that and they do away with tolling, we have a $200 million hole to fill. But that $200 million goes into the Renton to Bellevue widening and express toll lanes project. It's in preliminary engineering. It's anticipated to start construction in 2019. We're using a design build technique to get it done. And it'll be opening to traffic in 2024, which is very important to us, and I think it's even more important to our colleagues at Sound Transit, because that's the platform for the bus rapid transit system in the I-405 corridor. Another part of the funded work in the I-405 corridor is the direct connector from the express toll lanes on 405 to the hot lanes on 167. So that system is going to work really from the King County line all the way up to Linwood when these projects are completed by 2024, which is going to be a really good thing. But the construction, I came up through there today on my way to this meeting. It's not pleasant to live through the construction. So here's a kind of the schedule for 405 in terms of the current funding, and I think this is in everybody's package, but we're working on wrapping up the shoulder widening that we did. We're working on the 167 direct connector. That's under construction today. You can see the Renton to Bellevue that's in engineering. We're working on right-of-way and construction through 2024. As a part of that, we're doing some of the inline stations that were in ST3. We're working on the 132nd new half diamond interchange in Kirkland. That project is going to be starting the preliminary engineering of that this summer. In the next couple of years, we're going to start PE on interchange work at 520 and 124th in the Bellevue area. And we're also, as a part of ST3 and other work, looking at running buses on shoulder, both in I-405 and I-90, and some auxiliary lane work up on the north end. So that's the stuff that's funded today. Now, one of the things that happened when we opened up the express toll lane project between Bellevue and Bothell, and the investment, the substantial investment, was really between Bellevue and 522. It made that part of the highway work really, really well, and it moved a lot of the problem north to our good friends in Bothell. And when you move the cheese, you have a whole different group that's being affected by it. And what we heard loud and clear, we knew we were going to have to do some work as we were designing the project, as we were constructing the project. When we opened the project, it became very clear, and a lot of what we did was experimenting with our striping of entrance and access points and the timing and stuff like that. But working with the legislature, we also identified funding to look at improvements that we could make in the corridor as we worked towards the eventual implementation of the master plan. And the hard shoulder running lane from 527 up to I-5 was a concept in March of last year, and we opened it in April of this year. The work that the team did and the work that the elected officials did and the cooperation we had from the local governments that we work with was astounding. But we also have money to do planning work and preliminary engineering work on what could be as much as another $500 million of improvements to the north end. And shifting really quickly because I see the.
I'm sorry to be
No, that's your job. It's great. I get to be pushy every once in a while too. 520 celebrated the first anniversary of the bridge. Celebrated the winning of numerous awards, and we have the rest of the west to build. So there's about another $1.5 billion being invested. The approach bridge north that's under construction today is going to open this summer. At that time, you'll be able to ride a bicycle all the way across, which will be really cool. You'll also have a much more convenient auto or van pool or bus trip. But the team is working on design build projects in 3 phases that are going to rebuild the rest of the corridor all the way to I-5. Starting with the west approach bridge south, basically the eastbound lanes, all the way to Montlake, including some really interesting, park and pedestrian enhancements. And then we'll build from Montlake across Portage Bay over to I-5, and then we'll come back and we'll do the bridge there at Montlake Boulevard. This work is going to be happening between now and 2027. It's a 10-year program. Lots of excitement in store for the folks who live in that corridor, the folks that use that corridor. And this will be happening again at the same time as the work on I-90, just in terms of coordination.
Secretary Moore, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Sound Transit, and I think we have a little bit of a tag team. CEO, Sound Transit CEO Peter Rogoff, and I always get his title wrong, Executive Director of Planning, Environment, and Project Delivery? Project Management. Development. See, I always get it wrong. Rick Ilgenfritz. Peter, welcome.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to what we finally at Sound Transit referred to as Balducci Fest. We debated whether it was Balducci Fest or Balducci Palooza, but either works.
We'll take a survey again.
Okay. I think importantly, I really want to thank Claudia for having convened this. There really is a great deal of work going on the East Side. Roger just laid out an extraordinary amount of activity that is going on through WSDOT auspices. Obviously, we are now launching, the talking part is done, and now we are fully engaged in building out the funded investments for transit on the East Side, which, as Roger pointed out, will include the 405 BRT project. We are fully engaged in construction on Eastlink. We are initiating planning on a number of other projects, and there's a good news, bad news here. The good news is all these projects are funded, and we are going to move out, and we're actually tackling the congestion problem, not only throughout the entire region, but sort of very intensely here on the East Side. The bad news is, as the cliche goes, there needs to be some pain to get the gain. And we're now going into a period of intense construction activity in the whole region, but particularly on the East Side. And we need, literally, Roger Millar and I have had conversations about just to keep our cranes from literally crashing into one another, whether we need to consider how we can be working together, not just as partners, but in fact maybe as contractors to each other, where we are effectively in some places doing the WSDOT project in combination with the Sound Transit project, and they are in other places doing the same thing. Both for the purposes of efficiency and cost effectiveness, but also to eliminate conflicts. So having as intensely a planning exercise to plan for the disruption is as merited as all the planning that we go into to actually plan for the projects. So I really do want to commend Claudia for the vision of getting everyone here together to talk through that. I'm sure this will not be the end of the conversation, but is clearly going to be a very important beginning of a lengthier conversation. Beyond that, I'm going to let Rick do the heavy work in terms of walking through precisely what we are doing. But let me just say in closing, I was very pleased to hear Roger talk about things like bus on shoulder. The folks who put together the bus on shoulder vision for 90 has then sort of gave us street cred to go in the ST3 plan and put in some funding for bus on shoulder in other sub areas in the Sound Transit District. And this is what we call one of the early deliverables, one of the things that we could actually deliver that would have a demonstrable impact on people's daily commutes soon. This need not have a 14-year planning, design, and construction and delivery iteration. It can be done a lot sooner than that. So kudos and thank you to those folks. Let me just close with this. We just launched at our last board meeting just a couple of weeks ago our whole new implementation plan on the way we're going to deliver projects and deliver them on time and on budget through the next 25 years. It's a very exciting moment, but basically there are the two words that capture the whole thrust of what we need to do as an agency is greater collaboration through stronger partnerships with individual communities. And that's just not with the municipalities in which we're going to build, but it's also through even stronger partnerships with agencies like WSDOT and King County Metro, Community Transit, Pierce Transit, SDOT, and others. A lot of it really is about trying to take time off of the planning process to get shovels in the ground sooner. Some of you may remember we put out a draft Sound Transit plan, Sound Transit 3 plan in March of last year, and then when we heard a lot of concern about the delivery times throughout the taxing district, we accelerated those projects. We have now had to put a program in place that could actually enable us to deliver on that accelerated schedule. We did kick this off last Thursday, but please know that we will be looking for even more and greater intense collaboration with you, all with the goal of having everyone invested in delivering the projects on time. So thanks for your participation here. Thanks for your partnership with us. Thank you again, Claudia, for convening this meeting. And with that, I'll kick it to Rick.
Okay, good afternoon. How's everybody doing? You need coffee, sugar, chocolate, anything? I'll do my best to keep the energy level up. There's a lot of material to go through here. I too appreciated listening to the secretary, in particular his talk about engaging with the public, with affected communities, with partners. You know, that really is the key to this. When you're dealing with an 8 or 10 or 12 or even 15-year project, there is no point across that continuum where any of us in the public sector have the luxury of disengaging with the public. You know, our goal and our really the key to our ability to successfully deliver all this infrastructure is continuous engagement with the partners, with the cities, with the neighborhoods, with the public. So that is a central theme in all of the work we'll be talking about here today. This is information here that all of you are familiar with, and I won't review it you know, in depth, but we are a thriving region. We are growing, we are successful, we are experiencing the benefits of that success, but also the challenges, and the East Side is one significant pocket of a much bigger thriving region. We're 3 million people today. We are on our way to almost 4 million people by the end of the period we're talking about here, around 2040. We are experiencing congestion. We are experiencing travel time delay that is affecting our economy, that is affecting our quality of life. And these are the issues at the macro scale that we're all about trying to address. So how Sound Transit is doing that, you saw play out in both ST2 in 2008 and ST3 last fall. We are proposing and now, with the voters' approval, implementing a system that will eventually be 116 miles of grade-separated light rail with over 80 stations serving 16 cities across the 3 counties. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how that's going to come together at a high level and then dive a little deeper into what's happening in the near term on the East Side. So you will see as well as we go forward, this isn't something people are going to have to wait 25 years to see happen. We have deliverables across the program every couple of years, just like what everybody here saw and experienced last year with the opening of U-Link and Angle Lake. We'll be opening significant new capacity in the system in 2021. Again in 2023 with the Northgate, Linwood, and Eastlink segments opening, and that will complete ST2. And then we'll move right into the first wave of ST3 deliverables in 2024 with the Redmond extension, the Federal Way extension of light rail, and also the BRT projects that I'll talk about a little bit more. And of course, the second wave of major infrastructure beyond that will be the investments in Seattle, to West Seattle, to Ballard, down completing the spine to the city of Tacoma, and of course north up to Everett, eventually connecting out to the east side of King County with Issaquah and Totem Lake and Bellevue in between. So it's a full program, stuff happening constantly across that 25-year period. And what we get for that is a massive increase in capacity and mobility for the region. This is a chart that shows our ridership. A lot of you folks have seen this before. The blue on the left, the dark blue, shows actuals since the opening of light rail, believe it or not, 8 years ago. And the spike we saw over last year with the opening of the 2 new segments. We saw a pretty significant increase as we thought we would. As we move toward the full build out of the system, you can see how that ridership is forecasted to grow up to potentially as many as 800,000 daily riders in 2040. So it's a big undertaking. This is a quick overview of how it will come together. I mentioned the segments currently in operation. We are also obviously operating Sounder Commuter Rail and the ST Express network. There's Northgate coming online in 2021, Linwood and Eastlink in 2023. And here you see the BRT investments shown in orange in 405 corridor, 518 corridor, and 522. and also the extension down to downtown Redmond. We will be adding capacity in the sounder system as well during this period. There's a lot going on beyond that. As I showed you before, I'm not going to get into the second wave because our concern today is what's happening on the east side in the near to midterm. So taking a closer look at the east side, you can see the investments a little more closely. East Link with 10 stations serving Mercer Island, 6 stations in Bellevue, 2 stations at Overlake Village and Redmond Technology Center. And then, of course, the purple line there is the Totem Lake to Issaquah line. That's a big one. And then, of course, the BRT investments in the 405 and 522 corridors. There is also a park and ride lot up on the Sammamish Plateau. That will be among our early deliverables. It'll give another opportunity for folks up in Sammamish to connect to transit and get down to either East Link in Redmond or eventually in the future the Issaquah Light Rail Station. So diving a little bit closer to the Redmond project, this is a completion of the project that was originally covered in the East Link EIS. When we finished our project development work on East Link in 2011, you may not recall, but it actually did cover extending the line all the way to downtown Redmond, and we worked very closely with the city of Redmond to identify that alignment, those station locations, and get a record of decision from FTA covering that project. Late last year, the board directed us to initiate preliminary engineering on that segment, and we are now in the process of updating the preferred alternative and doing an supplemental environmental review. Our goal, pending internal review and affirmation by the board, is to pursue a design-build project delivery method that would allow us to open that project by 2024. Peter mentioned during the outreach process last year, during the ST3 decision process between March and June, we got a tremendous amount of feedback about speeding up project delivery timelines. Our initial fairly conservative assessment of when we thought we could deliver the Redmond project at the outset was 2028. Based on the feedback, we sharpened our pencils and started looking at expedited project delivery, and we were able to shave 4 years off the delivery for that project. So we've taken on a much more aggressive schedule commitment to do that, and that's what we're going to try to do. Looking at 405, now Secretary Millar covered this pretty in depth, so I don't want to duplicate everything he talked about. A couple of things to add to his presentation. This system will operate, I wonder if this laser printer will reach over there. Is that working? There it is. Okay, so this is essentially going to operate as 2 segments, one between Bellevue and Linwood, and one between Burien and Bellevue. So if you're traveling the length of the corridor, there would be a transfer in Bellevue. That is because the predominant travel patterns in this corridor are folks who want to get to and near Bellevue for work. So in the morning, it's the peak pattern southbound, and from the south end, it's northbound. If there are folks up here who want to go to Burien, they're probably going to take light rail. So that's the thinking behind how this system will operate. We do have some flexibility in the way the program was construed within ST2 to work with WSDOT. The board recognized that the WSDOT system and project might not remain in a static state over time. Kim and his team are working on coming up with some new ways of thinking about integrating transit with the electronic toll lanes and the basic configuration of the freeway. So we're going to be working very closely with WSDOT as they go forward with their project to make sure that its configuration can accommodate the most efficient possible transit operation in the future. But for now, our base assumption is that the buses will be operating in the center toll lanes, essentially between Totem Lake in the north and Renton in the south. We would be operating in the GP lanes or on the shoulders north of Totem Lake using flyer stops at 195th and 527, and to make the movements into and out of Linwood. So we'll continue to work with them on that as the configuration of 405 changes over time, but that's the baseline assumption. We will also have a bus maintenance facility up in the vicinity of Bothell, and that will provide an opportunity to efficiently stage, maintain, and deploy our bus fleet. So lots of excitement there. I spent a couple hours this morning with a number of Secretary Millar's staff. Dylan had some folks in from the Northwest region, from the Olympia region, and we went through the program in depth and came up with some strategies to figure out how we can coordinate as we get started on project delivery and project planning. Some of the infrastructure that we are funded to deliver is within WSDOT right-of-way. Some of it is outside the right-of-way, so we need to go through a process of getting ourselves organized about who's going to take responsibility for what in terms of environmental review, engineering, technical review, procurement, and actual project delivery. So that work is off and running, and I'm excited to report it. So what do we get for this? We think about, what is bus rapid transit? In many places in the country, it's different. It's in the eye of the beholder. In its truest form, it's fully grade separated and it acts like a train. But it can take a number of other forms too in terms of frequency, type of station, type of signal, type of lane access. And so when you look at the system we've assumed we're operating, using those electronic toll lanes or express toll lanes, these are the kinds of travel time savings we have forecast for transit users in the corridor versus how the system's performing today. So this is a pretty significant travel time advantage for transit users through the corridor. So let's move on to 522. This is a similar configuration. It's got a combination of rights-of-way. We're using primarily BAT lanes, business access transit lanes in the 522 corridor. And then in the 145th corridor, there between Lake City and Shoreline, we'll be using the GP lanes on 145th with a series of intersection and signal improvements to help buses get through that corridor expeditiously, primarily using bus pockets at the intersections with queue jumps through the main arterials. We're talking about 10 stations or 11 in the corridor. We've got 3 transit centers over the top of the lake in Kenmore, Lake Forest Park, and Bothell. And we will be working very closely with the cities in that corridor to coordinate that project development and delivery. Much the same way we're talking with WSDOT on 405. You've got a plethora of governance issues in this corridor in terms of who owns the dirt under the road, who owns the road, who's responsible for maintenance, who's got the zoning responsibility, the permitting authorities. Those are all issues we're going to be sorting out with the cities in the corridor. There's also King County Metro service in this corridor. There's also community transit service in the corridor. So the coordination challenge in this corridor is large and significant, and one we're eager to take on. I want to do a shout out to Rob Carlinzi, who's been helping us quite a bit figure out how we want to think about engaging in the corridor, planning the investments, and ultimately delivering them. So, almost done. Let's talk about what's happening with Eastlink. Eastlink is under construction. This is the corridor. I think everybody's pretty familiar by now with what the project is. It's a 14-mile project. As I said earlier, 10 stations. It's scheduled for revenue service in 2023. The project doesn't just stop at the International District in Seattle. The line continues all the way up through Seattle and to Linwood. So it's a one-seat ride in this corridor from Redmond to Linwood and back again. We have started construction in the city of Bellevue. We have let contracts throughout the rest of the corridor, and we'll be getting started in the I-90 corridor next month. So here we are in terms of the schedule. It's hard to believe we've been working on this as long as we have. We started the EIS in 2006. We finished it in 2011 after changing and updating the preferred alternative 3 times. And we went through a collaborative design process with the city of Bellevue to identify the downtown station and the configuration and the alignment through South Bellevue. And then most recently working through a long list of technical requirements with WSDOT in terms of the floating bridge, the transition joints, the track and OCS fixation methodology on the structure, And we're now, at this point, ready to go, pending the completion of the R8A project. Everybody knows what R8A is. That's changing the HOV lane configuration in the corridor. It's currently a 5x3 configuration, 5 lanes in one direction during the peak, 3 lanes in the off-peak direction, and vice versa. We are changing that to a 4x4 configuration, which will make the freeway work better, and that makes room to install light rail in the center roadway. Quick couple of things about what we're doing to prepare for construction, and then I'll wrap it up. This is a visual of, you've seen the beautiful sage green wall at Main and 112th in downtown. This is an aerial view inside of the staging area for the downtown tunnel. And that is a shot of excavation from the south side of the tunnel. We're already in over 100 feet, tunneling northward towards City Hall. Thinking about preparation for construction, there's some key issues here that I wanted to flag. To try to help the neighbors in the city and the neighborhoods peacefully coexist with construction. We've committed to maintaining 2 lanes in the peak direction on Bellevue Way. So essentially Bellevue Way is going to move from 4 lanes to 3 with reversible lanes moving in the peak direction with the morning and evening commutes. As was mentioned earlier, we're closing the Overlake and South Bellevue park and rides, and we've identified over 1,000 additional parking stalls served by transit and have been working directly with our customers over the last several months to help folks figure out where else they can park and get access to transit during this period. And then the D2 roadway, it's also been mentioned, will remain open through September of 2018, but then we'll have to close as we build that last couple of miles from Rainier Avenue down into the DSTT. This is a map that shows where the additional parking and additional transit service will be provided so that folks can adjust. It didn't reproduce very well in your handout, but it is online, and Luke's got a folio here with a much clearer rendering of that information. So we've had street teams and leafleting crews and mailings and web-based information and a hotline available for the last few months to try to get as much information out there to folks as we can to help them prepare for these changes. And at this point, we're hopefully ready to go. Last but not least, our good neighbor commitment. This is a commitment we have with our partner jurisdictions, with our citizens, our taxpayers, our voters, to try to do everything we can, humanly possible, to respond to folks' needs during construction. You know, as Roger said earlier, and I am wrapping up, John, we're sure not perfect. We try to do the best job we can, but nor are we new at this. We have built 20 miles of light rail with 19 stations, and we've learned a lot in that process, and we've adapted those lessons to the approach to delivering Eastlink, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure it's a success and that your citizens can live through it. So with that, I will conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And our fourth presentation, I'd like to welcome the General Manager of King County Metro, Rob Gannon, and the Deputy General Manager, Victor Obeso. Rob, Victor?
That's a good start. Good afternoon, everyone. And let me start by joining others in thanking Councilmember Balducci for bringing this occasion together. Let me also tell you that my goal is to finish my presentation and yield the floor to Victor, such that John doesn't have to make a third ominous venture to the stage. What I wanted to do is just give a very brief introduction of who I am and how we're trying to orient our agency, King County Metro, to be a good partner in this effort. A little bit of background: I am not a transportation professional, and I am unapologetic about that. I started my career working for Amazon.com in customer service, ultimately leading the customer service side of that organization for a period of time. I moved into higher education, where I worked to understand our place in the community, to negotiate with the faculty on labor and employment issues, and to organize budgets and finance to deliver the services of the university. Those things have informed how I'm attempting to lead the agency that is King County Metro. We are organized around 4 key business drivers. The first and most important to me is that we are leading an agency dedicated to keeping our system safe and making it even safer for our customers. And in a gathering like this, I hope that you all take safety for granted, but I want you also to know that our agency does not. So the trade-off is you take it for granted when we are doing large-scale planning exercises like this, but that is one of our core focuses inside the agency. Second, we want to make Metro a great or even greater place to work because we know that the services we provide to the customers of all agencies, all riders, to the constituents that make up the region, our first point of contact is that bus operator. Our second line is the mechanic servicing that bus. All of our agency has to be aligned around delivering outstanding service because that is the hallmark of good public transportation. The other 2 things that we organize around are improving our service reliability right now so that we are delivering on that promise to our customers. But at the same time, we know that we have to deliver an outstanding product today while we're building the capacity for the region to deliver on the demand for tomorrow. And fortunately, that's where I turn to Victor. Victor runs the capacity building and the planning aspects, and he's going to tell you all about it, and he's got it nailed. There's been a lot said already about the importance of how we collaborate, how we communicate, and how we build partnerships. And I don't want to reiterate unnecessarily the importance of that, but I do want to explain very quickly that that is an ethic or a set of ethics that we are driving deep into our organization. We know fundamentally that the value of our service is only defined by how good our customers experience that service, whether it's getting on the bus, whether it's getting to their destination, or whether it's the ultimate sense that they have about King County Metro. One of the things that has always guided my thinking about how we conduct business with our partners is that we can either compete to claim value or we can collaborate to create customer value. And that is something that I'm driving home each and every day to every level of our organization. We don't have our customers and Sound Transit customers. We don't have Eastside riders and downtown riders. We have customers, and our obligation is to create the value that they can experience. And when we look to partnership, the most important thing is that we understand that we're not competing with each other, whether that's agency to agency or whether it's jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Our job is to be the most effective partner in the room so that we're enabling our agency, our services to deliver the greatest shared value to our customers. So I just wanted to emphasize that and let you know that that is the most important thing that I do every day, while others in our agency are working to actually put that into play with all of you as our partners. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Victor, who's going to give some detailed information about the work of our agency and how we're going about those partnerships.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you all for having us here today. First off, I just need to note, as one of the 3 primary speakers, I knew 7 years ago that I was going to be a speaker here at the Eastside Transportation Forum, so I began growing a thin gray beard. And while Roger is actually rocking a real beard, it's clear that Rick and I are just tired of shaving our face. So I'm here today to talk to you about our long-range plan, Metro Connects, about changes to the bus network that we're talking to Eastside riders about on the 520 corridor to connect them with the light rail system at the University of Washington, and giving you a little bit of background on the One Center City planning effort, which is led by the City of Seattle. Sound Transit, Metro, and the Downtown Seattle Association are partners. and it truly is a regional project, which is why we're going to talk about it here today. First off, with Metro's long-range plan, Metro Connects, we have a vision for the future that this region asked us to develop and create. And we've pointed out to the region's 2040 transportation plan, but we've also set ourselves a network goal for 2025. And that's a vision where there's many significant near-term enhancements and opportunities combining Metro's efforts with those of your cities. And as you're developing and implementing your comprehensive plans, your transportation plans, that Metro is a partner in that. Several years ago, we were involved in a regional task force looking at bus service allocation, how we go about planning. And a big theme that came out of that was, does Metro lead development or does it follow development? And all of our plans to that time had been focused on the here and the now and what had recently occurred and what do we need to do next. So this long-range plan is really establishing a vision for the future that enables cities to see where you fit into the regional transportation plans for the public transportation system. We want to and hope that we'll further clarify and continue that work with you all and your staffs as we move forward. We're trying to be proactive, and it's our intent to significantly increase our collaboration with you cities. And one way that we're doing that this year, the plan was adopted earlier this year, and we have initiated a program called the Metro Connects Development Program, where we're working with policymakers at our Regional Transit Committee, which includes many representatives of cities around the tables here today. And we're working to clarify the intersection between policy and budget resources with our implementation of this plan. The plan includes many significant improvements for the East Side, beginning with a number of new rapid ride lines. In 2011, we implemented the B line connecting downtown Bellevue and downtown Redmond. And that was one of 6 lines that we implemented between 2010 and 2014. And in that time and since that implementation, the ridership demand on those services has grown over 70%. As very significant increase in attracting people to public transit. And in fact, today, 1 out of every 6 Metro riders is riding one of those 6 rapid ride lines. So we look to expand that system, which brings more frequent and convenient service to East Side riders. As Rick described, the EastLink project will add several new stations on the East Side, and every one of those stations is an opportunity for the bus network to connect people to the regional rail network, to expand their opportunities for travel, to connect them to a system that gives more reliability, faster service, and in most cases more frequent service than we can afford to operate on any given connection between points in our network. So we also, in doing this plan, it was timed and coordinated to closely follow the development of the Sound Transit System Plan and the development of ST3. Our plan incorporates all of the station locations, the lines that Sound Transit plans to create and extend. It includes the bus rapid transit lines, so our connection on the 522 corridor between Bothell and the University of Washington will take advantage of improvements that Sound Transit will make on the 522 corridor to close missing links of transit lanes on that corridor. They will provide a similar line going to a slightly different destination. Our long-range plan also includes parking and parking management strategies as one part of our access to transit strategies. So particularly in areas that are lower density, further away from the core cities of Bellevue and Seattle, parking access to transit is a very important aspect of reaching their destination. And this map illustrates the planned investments in parking capacity between now and 2040. And the blue and red bars are indicating On the corridor, these are not specific locations at this point, but corridors in which either Sound Transit or King County Metro or each of us are planning to add capacity. So the red portion of that bar is King County capacity that we plan, the blue portion, Sound Transit capacity. Today, there's just over 25,000 parking stalls in King County dedicated to park and rides for transit and rideshare users. And our plans will increase that by another 50%, over 13,000 new stalls in that period. It's important for me to note that our Metro Connects vision is not fully funded, and the bars at the bottom of this chart here on this slide indicate the estimated capital and service operating cost of both our 2025 and 2040 networks. The blue bar indicates the portion that is not funded based upon projections of our current revenue sources. So we recognize that we have a significant work to do to identify what we're going to do, what we can implement, what we have to implement, what capacity we need to create in order to be in a position to expand our system further. For example, in our capital investments of approximately $1.4 billion between now and 2025, over $300 million of that is dedicated to building an 8th operating base, which will enable us to expand our fleet capacity by about 250 vehicles. We have to have that capacity in order to be able to add fleet to our system and grow the services that we offer people every day. So that is part of the discussion that's ensuing in the Metro Connects development plan. On the service side, we're in a little better position with respect to current funding addressing the identified needs for additional service in our plan, but continue to be gaps there as well. So as we go through an implementation planning process and begin to identify initial priorities, we will come back to how do we achieve the rest of it, how do we fill that gap, and in what ways will cities play a role in that. I want to focus a little bit on our 520 restructures, but begin that by just talking a little bit about our history of reorganizing Metro system of what has been over 200 routes. With the implementation of light rail in recent years, we're now down to under 200 individual bus routes that operate through our system. We reorganize our service to improve the mobility of residents, customers, visitors to King County. And we do it in response to major transportation changes. So we've reorganized significant portions of our system in response to the implementation of the initial segment of light rail. We reorganized nearly a third of the resources of our system in Capitol Hill and Northeast Seattle as part of the U-Link extension last year with Sound Transit. And we've done significant restructures in association with our implementation of rapid ride lines. So bus service is flexible. It can be changed. We think one of the elements of being an innovative organization is not standing still, continuing with current patterns forever, but recognizing that the patterns of travel that people are engaging in, the patterns of growth that are occurring in our region are changing and following that change. I want to highlight the map on the right because there's been a lot of conversation about why are we invested in changing routes on the 520 corridor to connect with Link Light Rail, and to what degree is that discussion part of this One Center City project, which I'll describe in a few minutes, or the Convention Place Station sale that we'll make to the Washington State Convention Center, or the numerous projects in downtown Seattle. Our number one objective with examining these changes is to improve mobility of Eastside riders, to connect with the light rail system, to have better frequency, better reliability than they do today. And that's why we're examining this. And this map on the right, we actually created in 2015 as we were doing planning, initial planning for the U-Link process, when we had proposals on the table for changing routes on 520 to connect with light rail. At the time, there were not many Eastside riders who, and our customers who identified a U-Link process as affecting them. So when we put ideas out to the public, we didn't hear from very many people because they didn't see themselves connected to something called U-Link. So we are back in the discussion after over a year of conversations with the central Eastside cities. We are back into a formal public engagement process talking about all the routes on 520 and to what degree we can create benefits for riders on that corridor by connecting them. This follows a number of successful projects we've had on the east side in 2008 and 2011. We've had 50% growth in ridership on the 520 corridor, partly from investments, partly from tolling, and a significant change in travel behavior. We've had almost 40% growth in travel on the I-90 corridor on public transit. The timeline for this, just to make you aware, we're in conversations with the public today. While this is identified as one of the sub-projects of One Center City, each of those projects are moving forward according to the rules and regulations of each government. And in this case, any changes to Metro bus service goes directly through Claudia Balducci and the King County Council. And they will consider these changes after a long period of public engagement, after our examination of the possibilities. And early next year, about this time, we'll be asking them to make a decision if we carry that forward. These bar charts are ridership numbers before and after. The left-hand side in that darkly shaded box is 2015, and the right side is 2016. A little hard to see those dates. 12% overall growth in transit ridership with our changes to connect bus services to University Link extension last year. And at the same time, we were shifting some bus riders from buses to trains. Metro still attained its all-time high ridership that we had reached the year prior. So we did not system-wide lose ridership, and in fact, the system as a whole was gaining significant ridership. If you look at the bars on the left-hand side of the chart, the green and red and yellow, we added 7 million King County riders from 2015 to 2016. So very quickly, the One Center City effort is a four-party effort led by the City of Seattle. It's actually a 20-year planning process with an early phase addressing all of the construction activity, the cumulative effects of that construction activity that are happening in and around the center city of Seattle. As you look at that small collection of neighborhoods, it's 10 neighborhoods in the center of Seattle, relatively small part of the region. But nearly 2/3 of Metro's bus trips go through the Seattle Center City, and in fact, a lot of people from throughout King County ride buses through the Center City, and those buses from outside of Seattle that go through the Center City spend 25% of their time in that small geographic area. So how the transportation network works there has significant impact on people who live on the east side and in South County. The efforts around addressing the cumulative impacts of projects occurring in the Center City are not strictly limited to changes in bus service to reduce volumes of buses. That is part of the strategy, but we're also working with Seattle to add bus priority, complete their protected bike lane network to increase safety and separate the traffic on streets, and are looking at some pretty radical ideas with respect to street use and transit priority on their north-south boulevards in particular. And the map on the right illustrates that not only are we looking at changing bus routes coming across the 520 corridor, but Sound Transit's looking at the I-90 corridor, and we're also looking at services coming from Northgate and Southwest Seattle. Ariel spent a lot of time talking about the projects that are occurring in this time frame, and this is a different sort of timeline focused around projects in the Center City. It's not solely the State Convention Project addition that's creating this environment that we're trying to address. The waterfront is being rebuilt. There's a new streetcar being built on First Avenue. East Link Light Rail is being built into this downtown Seattle transit tunnel. It will need to begin work in our International District Station. And we're proposing to sell our property at Convention Place to the Washington State Convention Center. Underlying all of that is a ton of private development and other paving and other transportation projects. So there's a significant constraint on the transportation network. You saw this in our aerials charts. You see it in a different way here between 2018 and 2021, where these projects are all converging. It has been said that maybe we should delay some of these projects to avoid some of the impact. Well, the projects all have, I think we can all agree in this room, a significant regional benefit to create. They're going to have an impact when they're built, whether you build them this year, next year, or in 2025. Whether or not any one of these projects moves forward in the next couple of years, the other projects will create an environment that we still have to conduct this planning and address the transportation network in this part of the county. John, you've been standing there a moment. I want to close with what is somewhat of a funky map, but I didn't want to leave you that Center City map and have you think that all Metro's thinking about is downtown Seattle. I think the illustration of our long-range plan and what's there for the east side, there's a similar long list of projects there for South County. And we know that east of Lake Washington, the growth, the development, the jobs is as significant as the west side of Lake Washington and in South County. We think that the information that Metro has shared, WSDOT has shared, Sound Transit has shared today is one little piece of an illustration of how we work together, how we coordinate on projects. Numerous examples of projects that we've described today are projects that all three of our organizations or any two of our organizations are actively engaged in coordinating on. We think there's an opportunity to work very closely with your cities, and I think, as Rick put it, really an imperative to work on an ongoing basis in engaging your cities and your residents in how we develop our public transportation system in this region. So with that, and with John looming over me, I will conclude. Thank you.
Thank you.